Hey, this is Greg from the Dillinger Escape Plan, and you're watching KERRANG at Reading. My first show with Dillinger, the main thing that I remember is that Brian Benoit was on stage left. He was our guitar player at the time, and we were walking on stage from his side of the stage, and we were playing a little club in New York for CMJ weekend, which was college music festival in New York, and they played an instrumental song which would later become When Good Dogs Do Bad Things off of the Mike Patton EP that we did, Irony's a Dead Scene. They played that first, and then there was like a bell that would go off, and the bell would happen like 8 times, and or 7 times, and on the 7th time we would start this song that was called The Running Board, and I was supposed to come on as that bell was going off, and I remember standing on the side of the stage and that bell happening and feeling like it was like 1,000 years, so because I was so nervous. I was so nervous that Brian told me after the show that he didn't think I was going to come on stage. He was like, I looked over at you, and I just was like, this dude's like might not come on stage, and then the show was over. Like, it was like seriously a barrage of aggression that came out of us, and I don't remember a lot of the show. It was like kind of feels like a blackout moment to me, but I know that we were good. Like, I know that like people said that we were good, and that but that was my first experience with kind of what has happened a lot in this band for me, is like not having a recollection of playing. Like, a lot of our best shows I don't have a recollection of playing, and I kind of use that as a barometer now of whether the show was any good. The Virgin Megastore show was significant for a couple reasons. The truly awful thing was that we agreed to do that. It was a show for a lot of things people don't, well, one of the things people don't know, because now it's just been kind of lost to people just are like, oh, that's the Virgin Megastore where you round people's heads. That show was a benefit for the tsunami that had happened back then. And a friend of ours named Misha from that band Nazem was killed in that tsunami. So that show was a benefit for him, or for the tsunami victims. So we had done it for that reason, and I didn't really know that it was going to be inside of the store. Like, I thought maybe they were going to do it outside, and when we got there and it was like set up in the store, there were old people coming up and down the escalator like inside. I got really sick that day. That's another thing people don't know. So my recollection of that show is not the video. Like, I see the video now of like me running on people, and my memory of that show now is the video, because I've seen it so many times. But I was sick and throwing up backstage, like up until like a few minutes before we played, and then I left the stage during Phone Home and threw up some more, because I had eaten like some bad like Italian food earlier at this restaurant called Sorrento's down the street. Like, I had eaten some bad lasagna, and I was throwing up, so I felt like shit like the whole time we were playing. But I didn't remember that what people call like the head walk. I didn't remember it until I saw the video, and now I truly, when I mean this, there's not a week of my life, even off tour, that goes by that someone doesn't ask me about that as if I've never seen it before. If I run into someone in LA that's kind of like a Dillinger fan, the first thing they'll say is, hey man, like, they'll be like, you're Dillinger Escape? I'm like, yeah, and they're like, so I saw this video, I don't know if you've ever seen it. And I'm like, no, I've never seen it. The Virgin Megastore, they're like, yeah, we're like, run on people. Like, they always preface it with, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like if I live in a cave somewhere and don't have YouTube. It's funny, when we were coming into the show today, we got here at around 1:30 p.m. and we're in like this shuttle that brings you here from the hotel. And I looked at the time and I was like, shit, like 14 years ago, by this time I had already thrown my own poop at people, which was like, because we played first that day. We played at noon. So it was such a weird, we've played Reading and Leeds since then too. That's what no one ever talks about. We played Reading and Leeds in like 2005, I think. And we actually were way better, but no one ever talks about that because of how insane the idea of throwing your own poop at a crowd is. That day was, we were so out of control kind of on stage back then that didn't even seem that crazy. That's the crazy thing about that, is I realized as I was driving here today that every show we were playing back then, we were lighting our drums on fire, we were smashing all our instruments, we were throwing gear into the crowd, we were knocking things over, breaking things that didn't belong to us. there was so much chaos happening in that time that that shitting on stage and throwing it at people didn't even seem that great. Like, it didn't seem out of the realm of possibility. So I was really shocked, actually, when it was like such a huge deal, which is silly because obviously it's insane. Objectively, it's insane now that I'm older and I look at it. But the crazy thing to me is that that if someone did that now, they would probably get arrested. Like, as soon as they walked off stage, they would probably turn them off. Now that I'm older, I'm like, I can't believe they didn't turn us off, because it wasn't like the grand finale. We still had like a few songs left. So why did they even allow us to keep playing? Why was I not arrested the second I walked off stage? Those kind of things I think of now, and I'm like, or why didn't I care? Like, when I was 21 or 22, however old I was, like, I just must not have believed that I could be arrested for anything. But they tried to kick me out of England. They tried to say that I could never come back due to like crazy public indecency. And like a couple days after it happened, we received word that there's a possibility I might not be allowed back in England. Like, all this weird shit. So, but luckily here I am. No, man. It was early in the day, and as most people, you know, you kind of get that out of the way early in the day, but I never did. I made a point to hang on to it, and you know, the turtle, the malicious turtle, was pretty easy to, you know, I fired that fucker right out of the hole, man. What? There was no way in hell that I thought we were ever going to make a living doing this, or that in 14 years I'd still be having a conversation as Greg for Dillinger Escape Plan. Like, I just thought that this was a ball of fire that's going to implode, or, you know, it's got a shelf life. There's no way this can continue. So when we would get asked to play something like that, in my head, I'm like, well, this is never going to happen again. When am I ever going to play a festival with bands I don't like? You know, that was kind of the other thing, is that was the first time we ever played with bands we don't like. Up until then, it was like you go on tour with bands that you feel a kinship with, and we had never been exposed to like some mass thing where you're playing with a band like, you know, Puddle of Mud or whoever it was at the time that really made me feel like, oh, I got to make some kind of a statement. So it was a kind of a combo of wanting to cause the biggest ruckus imaginable, since we're obviously never going to do this again anyway. I might as well make sure that we're never allowed to do this again anyway. And then just kind of making a statement in a way that I felt would be unavoidable for people to pay attention to. Yeah, we would do, when we went out with Deftones, which was kind of a long time coming. Like, I had met those guys back in like 2003 or 2004, and they were one of the first bigger bands that kind of took an interest in us in a way that let me know that we were on the right track. You know, throughout the years, you know, you kind of have like people that you used to look up to in some sort of a way, and if they acknowledge you, it's almost like a signpost that you're doing the right thing. So we would have people like Mike Patton or the Deftones or Nine Inch Nails throughout the years just kind of say something good to us or acknowledge us, and that lets you know that you must be doing something right. And kind of around like 03 or 04, I started becoming friendly with those guys, and then it just became a matter of time before we toured together. And we had tried to make it happen sooner, and schedules didn't line up. So when it finally happened, you know, they would play Passenger every night, and I would come out and do Maynard's part, which was really surreal, because obviously, you know, Maynard is another incredible singer. So if you have a guy like Chino who is entrusting me every night to come out and do the part of a guy who is one of the greats, that for me personally was a huge honor and kind of a huge responsibility for me to be like, okay, like, not only is Chino trusting me to do this, but Maynard's going to see this video at some point, or he's going to like become aware that this is happening, and I want that guy to see it and feel like I'm doing his part justice. So you start to feel an obligation as a singer that maybe someone's passing a torch in some way, or at least kind of like putting the ball in your court in a way that's like, hey, I'm going to pass you this, and you're going to get the shot, and don't fuck up, you know. So, but we did it like 40 times or something like that. So that was a highlight for me every night. Yeah. The Nine Inch Nails thing is another crazy thing, such a random thing. That's another guy who, around the same time I met the Deftones, I had a friend, I had done a record with this guy, Atticus Ross. We did an EP together called Error, and Atticus ended up becoming kind of Trent's, part of Trent's production team. And then my friend Aaron North, who used to be in that band, the Icarus Line, ended up playing guitar for Nine Inch Nails. So I had all this, you know, I'd run into Trent, and my first meeting with Trent was really funny because I wasn't like a fan of Nine Inch Nails in the 90s. Like, I just missed it somehow. Like, you know how like there's big bands that you just missed, and I just missed it in some weird way. So when I met him, I wasn't like enamored with him. I knew that of his artistic credibility and what he had accomplished, but I wasn't like, it wasn't like how a lot of people would have treated him. So when I met him, I just kind of acted like really. I think I was eating his rider. Like I went into his backstage, and he had like a Cliff Bar or something. I just like started eating it, and he came in and just looked at me like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But I was terrified, man. I had sung that song with Dillinger a bunch, and I was so scared of forgetting the lyrics. And there's not that many of them, you know. And it's so many. It's like so less than Dillinger. It's not nearly as difficult of timings and shit like that. But yeah, it's like 2 riffs, and I was terrified of forgetting the lyrics because I realized that people are very into Nine Inch Nails and they're very protective of that band. They have like a very cult fan base. They're probably one of the biggest cult bands of all time. So I was just like, man, if I get up here and fuck this up in any way, shape, or form, I'm gonna get skewered, you know. But again, that's another thing like the Chino thing where it's like someone that I respect and trusted me to not embarrass them, and that was very important to me. It let me know that I must be doing something right if they put that confidence in me.